because you're taking somebody that, in fact, has been quite successful over their business career, likely has a great company, great service, makes good money, and then you're kind of telling that it's not enough yet. They're kind of looking at you and you're slapping them across the face because you've actually said what they thought was really successful is not as significant as it might be. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Exit Is Now podcast with me, your host, Scott Snider. I am hanging out here with somebody that I think our audience knows well, Paige, who's our director of marketing, a close friend of mine. And since it is our last show of the year, last show of, let's call it season 1, a deep thank you to helping me create what has been a really, really cool experience. We've gotten a lot of great feedback from everyone. We've had a lot of great guests. 20-something shows, kind of a year later. So thank you for that.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
Thank you to all the guests that have been on. I think it's been a really cool year.
I think that it has been an awesome year. I have learned a lot myself along the way. I also want to thank Colleen, our content manager, who's sitting behind the glass today in the studio with us, for helping us produce such a great show. And I have to give a shout out to your husband, Kurt, for building this unbelievable wall behind me and really helping us bring the studio together this year too. It's certainly been it's been a hell of a year here at EPI. I know, Kurt, you're probably listening. I think you're like our number one fan, so I appreciate that.
He's going to be really excited about the shout out. We were his number one podcast this year on Spotify Wrapped.
Yeah.
So he's going to be very excited.
Me and Kurt go way back. I don't know if we've heard this story, but Kurt, the only reason I know Paige is because of her husband, Kurt. Is that I coached Kurt in high school soccer. That may be what do they say, age myself a little bit, but nonetheless, that is how I met him. So in today's show, what Paige and I decided to do, and actually you should tune into Paige's episode. So she was one of our first 3 episodes of the year, so relatively new where she came on the air. What we did in looking back over the course of our 20-plus episodes and 12 months of season 1 was take out maybe the top 4 moments that not just were top moments for 2023, but were moments that also kind of played well into what's to come in 2024. So what we're going to do on the show today is revisit some of those critical moments, play you guys some clips from those moments that you can watch or listen into, and then Paige and I are going to jive back and forth with some questions along the way. Remember, in our first season here, the theme really was introducing value acceleration, really from a business owner's perspective. And so we looked into our lives here at EPI, my life as a business owner, a family business owner, and through the folks that have had impact directly or indirectly on me and my team and our business, and kind of wanted to showcase in 2023 our journey through value acceleration. So first up is an early episode 2 of the Exit Is Now podcast with 2, I would say, household names in the exit planning community. We had Sean Hutchinson and Justin Goodbread on the show. Sean sat next to my dad, Chris, in one of the first classes ever of the Certified Exit Planning Advisor program back in 2008. He is currently a faculty member still with us, a value growth advisor, and one of the first exit planner of the year. Why I thought it was interesting is that in 2022, Justin Goodbread joined that class of all-stars by becoming the exit planner of the year. Also a value growth advisor with a spin. He also does financial advisory. Brought these 2 gentlemen together to talk to me kind of right out of the gate about the evolution of exit planning. And what was nice about that to start the year was kind of the loose theme of our exit planning summit, as we then, just a few months later, debuted Walking to Destiny, the 2nd edition. So let's listen to that clip with Sean and Justin, and then Paige and I will go back and forth on some questions on it. So listen in.
We have to get away from the idea that exit planning is a purely transactional process. It actually is transformational, right? So to a certain extent, when you talk about the gap between where you are and where you need to be financially, emotionally, whatever it might be, the journey from one point to another is actually going to change your life, right? That's going to feel different to people. It's going to be not just a financial context. It's going to be something that they haven't actually felt before. The process is also meant to unstick people, My feeling is that a lot of owners who have gotten to the point where they can actually think about this is an investment, not just a source of income, so they begin to change the conversation using different words. Just that change in vocabulary is a really interesting pivot to see them go through, right? So you're talking about, you do the same thing, right? Success to significance. Just saying it out loud is powerful.
Yeah, I think
that gets people. That gets people really, changing the context. When we talk about exit planning as business strategy, we're actually setting context for decision making.
So, Scott, it was nice to have them on early because the evolution of exit planning really became a theme throughout this year through Chris's Walking to Destiny book, at the summit. So on that theme of the evolution of exit planning, how do you envision the continued evolution of exit planning?
Yeah, I think that it really came. I think it was actually a bigger theme than I thought it was going to be. It was something that Dad and I had talked about leading into his book. But I think if you listen to Sean in that clip, it's really spot on. What I take from the clip is that it's really a mindset shift for a business owner. I think it's something that if you've seen me throughout 2023 speak in maybe our chapter launches in particular, I've actually tweaked the way I'm talking about exit planning now because, in my opinion, as an entrepreneur, as a lifelong entrepreneur myself at age 16 to now age 38, I would say through the books I've read, through the college courses I took, through the high school classes I had, and then through a lot of fellow business owner mentors, we have always been concentrated on income generation and not value creation. I think as an entrepreneur, young or old, we are taught to we're taught to have a strong P&L. We're taught to have a strong balance sheet. We're taught to have great people and efficiencies and drive profitable revenue. That's an all income things, all things that are needed to have a successful company, but really all income generated things. What you hear Sean talking about in this transformational, not transactional kind of mindset shift is now we're saying we got to do all that, but how does it affect the business, personal, and financial elements of our company? How does it drive strong business value kind of long term? And I think it's the biggest hurdle for a professional advisor in teaching that, because you're taking somebody that, in fact, has been quite successful over their business career, likely has a great company, great service, makes good money, and then you're kind of telling that it's not enough yet, that they have to equate all of that to value. And when they do, for the very first time, they're kind of looking at you and you're slapping them across the face because you've actually said what they thought was really successful is not as significant as it might be. And so really I think it's a hard lesson, but once the business owner can kind of move from success to significance, it's such a transformational mindset shift that it's really empowering. Not only will your company become more valuable, but you'll have more year in and year out success along the way. So I think a super cool clip to go back to. So second clip.
Yeah.
So the second clip comes from our good friend Tom Deans, who came down from Toronto, Canada. He's very big in the family business space. He's very big specifically in the Exit Planning Institute space, and I would say the exit planning community overall. He's episode 5, and he came in to talk about the family in your business and was joined by one of our own, Amy Wirtz, who's a SEPA faculty member and a family business consultant. A lot of interesting things to say. It was like an early show too, Paige, because they didn't necessarily agree all the time.
Absolutely.
So, right, and sitting in the middle of the chair here with two guests to my left and right and trying to move the conversation along and combine both of their thoughts, I remember it being kind of interesting. But I always respected Tom because, for me, Tom changed my life early on. It was a book. His book, Every Family's Business, includes the Family Business Blueprint, which me and Dad do about this time every year in December of every year. We ask and answer the questions involved in that family business blueprint. And Tom's kind of unique. He's saying that family businesses should sell. They shouldn't be gifted. They shouldn't go into the next generation. And they should always be built to sell to a third party. So let's listen to a clip from episode 5 of the Exit Is Now podcast with Tom Deans.
There's an old expression on the prairies. You can eat a cow one burger at a time. Do you know why so many family businesses never sell internally? It's because mom and dad finally in their 70s go, hey kids, do you want to buy the business? It's worth $10 million. Like, where are the kids going to come up with $10
Where are you
million?
getting $10 million?
But when they started in their 30s or 40s and said, hey, kids, do you want to buy one share and then use the dividend from that one share to buy 2 shares and 2 shares, now a bigger dividend, now 4 shares, 8 shares, 15, 30% of the business? That's a nice dividend stream. When they get to 51%, which was my goal when I was buying shares in my father's business, my father taught me that I would have definitive control. I could change the dividend policy, suck the retained earnings out of the business, and retire my personal debt. I didn't trip over that idea in the forest walking my dog one morning. He taught it to me.
Yeah.
And if I didn't want to get to 51%, then we would sell it to the highest bidder. And then we would harvest that wealth, and then we would start the next journey of our family journey, which is not chemicals, not plastics, not publishing, high tech. I don't know what's next for my kids. That's up to them to decide, with all sorts of advantages that comes with the transition of lots of communication and coaching and transparency around the transition of family wealth.
Scott, so I don't know if you know this, or saw, but this clip actually created probably the most engagement and just discourse overall in the comment section when we posted on social media. So on that note, I guess starting the conversation about business succession at a younger age involves engaging the next generation earlier on. So what are the advantages of initiating these discussions sooner, and what challenges might arise from that approach?
Yeah, that's interesting. Tom, I guess, is a controversial guy. So when you're saying stuff like in that clip, he was talking about eating the cow one burger at a time and how he didn't just like stumble upon these ideas
walking his dog in the forest.
Yeah, walking his dog in the forest. Tom can be an entertaining and I guess controversial guy. So, but I think brings up some really good points. And I love Tom. I don't necessarily always agree with Tom, but Tom's one of those guys in my life that always just challenges the way I think, challenges the status quo, and maybe I'm not 100% his way, but has certainly made impacts along the way to make me think slightly different. So, and I think his point on this engagement of the next generation early on, I think it's actually critical. I think we see a lot of people in family businesses gifting shares. Yeah. And I think how they kind of just perhaps a little bit kind of come into ownership. But when I think about engaging early, I think that many family business owners teach their sons and daughters about the craft of their business, so whatever they're making. So we do professional education here at EPI. We host events and create content at EPI. I had Rick Lang and Joe Kalt on my show, two of my friends that are third generation. Rick does heavy equipment hauling. Joe manufactures things. And I'm sure their dads have taught them about the craft. Yep. But at Joe and Rick's Rick and Rick's age at 30 years old, they have not taught them a lot about the business yet. No. But yet Joe Kalt on the show announced that he'd moved from plant manager to the vice president of the company. And though he's now 30-something years old and have been working there since he's probably been 14, Dad hasn't really spent a ton of time on saying, well, this is the business of how we make that thing. And so I think by engaging the next generation owner much earlier on, it allows them to come alongside you both from a business person and a craftsman. And I think if you lean into the value acceleration methodology, and a lot of our CEPAs have done this with their clients, I think for a guy going back to Joe Kalt, he came to a CEPA here in Cleveland, Mike Trabert, who's part of a firm called Markham. He came to one of Markham's owner roundtables where they learned about the value acceleration methodology, and he called me up after he went, and he said, dude, I went to one of those roundtables hosted by one of your CEPAs. And he said, dude, in that hour and a half lunch session, I learned more about running a business than I've done my entire career or my entire 4 years in going to college. So I think that the value acceleration methodology, if engaged early on, could be used as this like intergenerational educational tool and really kind of bring everything kind of together. It goes back to kind of the Tom Dean's Every Family's Business, Family Business Blueprint. By even bringing that tool early on to the game allows you and your dad or you and your mom or you and the whole family kind of just get together on the same kind of playing field each year. But nonetheless, definitely an interesting concept.
Definitely. On that note, I guess how does the process of gradually acquiring shares over time impact the sense of ownership and commitment of the next generation to the business?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the old-fashioned saying of having skin in the game, right? I think that I contributed to really one of the reasons my dad and I have a good relationship. Obviously, we practice what we preach. We do the value acceleration stuff. We do the Tom Dean's Family Business Blueprint stuff. but I own 49% of EPI. And I gradually earned my way into EPI over my 11 or 12 years of owning EPI with Dad.
Yep.
And so now being 49% owner, it feels different than just getting a gift.
Yeah.
And I think that in the case of even Rick and Joe, if their dads had started getting them shares, even if they were, not to say that I agree with it, but even if they were gifted shares, having that responsibility now is just a hell of a lot more of a burden than not. And I think it almost forces the younger generation to learn more about the business and maybe accelerate their knowledge. But it also, I think, my dad looks at me different because I'm not just his son in the business that swept the floor, then ran the machine, now runs the plan, and now is my vice president.
Definitely.
I'm his business partner, and he's accountable to me, and I'm accountable to him. And he has majority share, so if he does have to pull that card, he's got to do that with his son, and he's got to do that with his business partner. So I think having skin in the game early matters. But to Tom's point, too, doing it too late almost forces your kids out. I don't know how many next generation kids can afford a $10, $15, or $50 million company. You almost price your kids out of it.
Yeah.
And a gift is almost necessary at that point. But nonetheless, thank you, Tom, if you're listening, for all of the exciting insights over the last show.
Perfect. Should we move on to our next clip?
Yeah, let's go to the next clip. So clip 3 comes also an early one. Clip 3 is from episode 4 with our good friends at Initiative One Leadership Institute, a husband and wife team from Wisconsin is where they're based out of today. Fred Johnson and Tracy Johnson. Heard us talk about them a lot. I'm not going to go down the whole thing. Listen to episode 4 if you want to hear it. But without doubt, a major impact on all of our lives, your life, my life, everybody here at EPI. So let's tune into their episode and a clip from their episode titled "How to Live Your Purpose as a Leader."
If you have 8 people on your team that don't have a clue of who they are, and they're making decisions, fighting the latest fire, who's making the greatest noise, when they get into a company, they're going to do the same thing collectively.
Yeah.
And what we know about world-class companies is they don't react, they make decisions based upon what is my purpose, what are our core values, and what are our 2 to 3 critical goals. They don't try to be all things to all people. If you try to be all things to all people in your personal life, you either live by your purpose or you're going to live by other people's noise.
So how has understanding and aligning your personal purpose, Scott, influenced your approach to running EPI?
Yeah, I would say that this is like a heavy moment, right? It's like a heavy impact moment in certainly my business owner journey and my career, and then as me as a person. I mean, me and you, literally before we met Fred Johnson, Paige I talk about Paige quite a bit. She's one of my most trusted advisors in my life, not just in my business, but she's like my life coach. But if you rewound like 3 years ago, me and Paige barely even spoke.
We didn't talk.
We didn't talk really at
No.
all. And so if you think about that transition from 2020 to 2023, it's been significant. And I think really what helped us along was that training that we did at Initiative One, but also finding both of our purposes along the way. So the effects on me have been massive. It was interesting because nowadays it's really a part of our human and structural capital. We take everybody through Initiative One's training. And as we record our episode today, me and the group just came through our ninth session, where we closed out by reciting what we felt our 2-word purpose statement to be. And though I came out with one that I was passionate about in 2021 or whatever, when we finished the program originally, when Paige and I went through together with the rest of the executive team and some of the core people that were here at the time, I changed my purpose statement. So it used to be around driving significant experiences for people and for myself.
Yeah.
And I summed that down. Fred always kind of gave me a lot of crap because it's supposed to be a 2-word purpose statement. I could never get there. Mm-hmm. So now it is empowering growth. And I think it plays off that experience. But if you think about the first word, it's a contributor to somebody.
Yeah.
And then the second word is the impact moment. So I'm empowering somebody to grow, right? It's the contribution and then the impact. And if you look across the work that we do at EPI, when you look at the work that we do internally here at EPI with our people, I think that's really a great thing for me. And now
Absolutely.
taking that purpose, it just allows me to make, frankly, a lot easier business decisions along the way because it's either on purpose for me or it's not. And really, for the most part, it's kind of how I run my days. I'm either saying I need to delegate that or I'm taking that because it's right on purpose for me, and that's where my highest and best use is. But nonetheless, finding that purpose has been absolutely critical in my career.
So, in your experience in
Yeah.
finding your personal purpose, how does it guide or influence maybe decisions you make as a business owner?
It's the same type of thing, right? I think the first thing was once we all found purpose in that group, right? And then we were able to re-identify what our core values were. So we literally ripped off the plaque of the wall and we didn't actually put one back up. And I don't frankly even think we need one because we live it every day. We talk about those core values every day. So one, it influenced me that way. Two, with a purpose like empowering growth, I think it's one of the reasons that we have a huge professional development budget. I think it's one of the reasons that EPI can grow as fast as it's growing and as meaningful as it's growing. And again, I think it allows me not only to make day-to-day decisions, but it allows me to make long-term decisions that are not just income generating, but value creating. What does the summit going to look like?
Definitely.
I remember when after we came through that, we brought back the summit in 2022. Me, you, and Jocelyn, who's our operations manager who oversees our summit, along with some other kind of key folks in producing that event, got into our conference room, if you remember, Paige, and threw up some of those huge sticky notes.
Definitely.
And wrote down, I don't know what you would call it, right? Like, what's the brand of that particular thing? If I went there, I would feel X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, it's the feel.
And if you looked at those things, they were all about empowering growth.
Yep.
And that's really what it became. It became a place where you have transformational experiences, where you meet great people and you can innovate and create.
Yep.
And all of those are about empowering growth for others, our certified exit planning advisors. So I think that in those kind of small examples, you can kind of see how it's actually kind of made some decisions for us along the way.
Absolutely. So on that note of your personal purpose kind of shaping decisions, do you have a specific instance where it shaped maybe a strategic decision or the direction of EPI?
Gosh, golly. I mean, so yeah, I guess we went into like maybe specific. This is like, she's like, I think this is like Paige's dream. Like, let's just put Scott on the spot
Absolutely,
randomly
it is.
for the course of an hour-long podcast episode. So I would say, from a strategic standpoint, I think it has decided on how I spend my time and how I relinquish control. I go back to maybe 2022 and certainly in 2023. The theme for Dad and I, being the owners of EPI, has really been about decentralizing the business owner. And again, going back again to my personal purpose of empowering growth, I actually just laughed today at this with Margot, who's on our operations team. She actually controls all the money in and money out. So if you're looking to get a bill paid, call Margot, right? So, believe it or not, even with 30 people and 5,000 SEPAs and a pretty large company these days, I'm still involved in the approval of expenses, if you can believe that or not. For all of our SEPAs on there, you guys are probably all rolling your eyes and saying, Scott, delegate and elevate. Why me and Margot had this conversation today, and I like it takes 30 minutes of my day twice a month where Margot comes in and presents to me, here's all the expenses that need to be paid. This is why or why not. Do you approve? Do you disapprove? And I like that because as a business owner, it has allowed me over the years to kind of just stay in tune to the cash flow of the business.
Yep.
And then I think that for me, signing the front of the check is always kind of meaningful as well, although they probably make stamps or something for that today to streamline that because if I'm out of town, Margot's waiting for a signed check. But anyways, when I think about my purpose of empowering growth, I have been able to get Margot to a point where, frankly, she doesn't need me, and she doesn't even need Jocelyn, who's her manager, to look at these. Margot understands as an empower and maybe as an empowering growth moment, like, let's take the reins and run a little bit. Mm-hmm. If we really want to move everybody forward, including yourself, including me, you have to just take that and run. You know what to approve and what not to approve. And so I think it's a small decision, but if you think about if I can delegate that off to Margot, it not only moves her in a new and fresh direction, but it also allows me to, interact more with our SEPAs, create the next piece of content, whatever that might be. But I think that, I think it's shaped my relationship with my dad, my relationship with you. And so I don't know if those are strategic moments, but I think that they're influential moments along the way that really help thrust our human, structural, customer, and social capital, for the better.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. My last question would be, how do you communicate this and instill the importance of finding your personal purpose to your employees? So how do you integrate that into our culture?
I think it's having like an open and honest conversation about it like we're having now, right?
Yeah.
So what was my life like without the purpose? What is it like now? And then we make the commitment of sending all of our employees through it. So not only do they get to hear you talk about it and some of the other folks that have gone through finding purpose, but then after being here a year, they're eligible to join that program and sit through these 9 sessions over these 9 weeks and investigate for themselves what their meaning is. And so I think it's kind of putting your money where your mouth is. If it's so important to professional and personal growth, and if it's so a part of our culture, can I get into it as well? So we've integrated into our professional development plan for all of our employees that come into our business. They'll be able to go through that program.
Perfect.
So you want to get to our last and final moment.
Clip. Yep.
So last and final moment, we fast forward, frankly, to really the end of the year in episode 22 with our friend Casey Clark, who runs a value advisory, value growth consulting firm that is headquartered, I believe, in Chicago, but is really dispersed all across the United States, called Cultivate Advisors. What I loved about the episode with Casey is I shared this aha moment that I had from Justin Goodbread, who's again Exit Planner of the Year and someone from that we heard on episode 2, where we always talk about this work-life balance. In fact, Paige, it's like a part of our core values, and it's something that we always challenge ourselves to maybe we should change or reword. But when I talked about work-life balance with Justin originally, back on episode 2, he said, I don't believe in balance at all. You're never perfectly in balance. I think it's a little ridiculous to kind of talk about. I believe in a blend. I shared that story with Casey as well, being a younger entrepreneur in his career and owning such a significant value advisory firm, how he kind of blends and balances his time. And he said, what did he say? He said, how many hours a week did he say he worked? Do you remember? It was something like, I only work like 30 hours a week. Yeah. And I was like, I don't know how the hell you get anything done in 30 hours a week. I probably work double that. Yeah. And in this particular clip, when we talk about his kind of young entrepreneur journey, he talks to me about how he manages his time and continues to delegate and elevate. And by working in this 30-hour work week, it challenges you to really think about how you're spending that time and how to effectively delegate and elevate. So let's listen to the clip with Casey.
So my painting business was a burnout, just in full transparency. I was working 80-hour weeks. I did not have blend. I was a 20-year-old, 25-year-old party animal.
Yeah, kicking ass.
Yeah. Didn't care. Was working every hour I could. When I started this, I knew I needed something more sustainable. I had other priorities in life that were important to me, et cetera, et cetera. And full transparency, about a year and a half in, I came up with a rule. And I just said, you pick the number of hours you're willing to work every week, and that's the most amount of hours you're allowed to work. No ifs and buts about it. You will solve it if you want to. And so I know some people use the words blended, like it's in season. I disagree with that.
Really?
I really do.
So it's not seasonal for you. You're going every week?
Yeah, I mean, look, for it's fine if like 1 week I'm like, oh, I've got a big conference, it's a lot of travel, so I'm gonna have to work 55 hours this week. Yeah, that's fine. But the reality is for me, I work 45 hours a week, and you're not gonna get me to work outside of that under any circumstance.
So it's the same hours for you most.
I work at 9 to 5.
9 to 5.
Yeah, I may start earlier, but yeah, like I have my schedule. And this is the schedule. Like imagine in my Google Calendar right now, you went in there, you just see nothing but blackouts. Yeah. No one can touch it, and I will not give on it.
And so how did you structure that, though? So did you do that early on, or was that something that you said
just
like
block it out?
Yeah.
Just block it out. Pretend it doesn't exist. And it kills my wife. Like my wife works at corporate jobs, just an amazing person. Yeah. Kills her even because she's, at night I'll be like, oh, I'm so overwhelmed. I've got so much going on. I'm so far behind. I probably need 9 hours to catch up. She's like, just work. I'm going to work tonight. You work. Like, let's not watch a show tonight.
Not doing
I'm like,
that.
Absolutely not. You know, and she just laughs like, well, why are you complaining? I'm like, because I have a lot to do and I'm behind by 9 hours and I have to go problem solve that next time I go back to work.
Yeah, tomorrow morning at 9.
Tomorrow morning
Yeah.
when I start at, 8 a.m.
Yeah,
But
whenever you start.
Yeah. But so for me, I believe some people need to hear this. I don't disagree with blended. I don't believe that is actually truly the way it has to be done.
Yeah,
I believe that you can lock and load because otherwise you don't ever find your efficiencies. You don't ever find your production output because you're willing to move the number of hours. But when you have a flat number of hours, it forces you to start to delegate. It forces you to start to move stuff off your plate. And if you don't, how do you know when to say no? How do you, K-N-O-W, know when to say N-O, no? Right.
So this clip with Casey, and then when you talked about it with Justin in episode 2, it became kind of like a great debate of the blend versus a balance. So after hearing the different perspectives this year on a work-life balance, and it's seasonal like Justin suggested, or maybe how Casey suggested blocking things off, where do you personally stand now?
Yeah, I think this is like so I don't want to say 100% agree with Casey. I just don't know really how it's done. What I think that the audience, or maybe for me, but I would challenge the audience certainly to take out of that, is really this when he talks about blocking the calendar and how if you just challenge yourself. So he said he worked 45 hours a week. And if you did just challenge whatever, I think Casey's point is valid though. He said whatever your hours are, it could be 30, 45, 50. You don't really know how to delegate and elevate if you're willing to work more and less and it's week to week, because some days I do 80, some days I do 40, without really staying true to a number and blocking out time. You don't really know what you could delegate and elevate. So what I really take from that conversation with him is, if I did say, I'm going to, for a month, work 45 hours a week, I know that the stuff I need to work on 45 hours a week has to be the highest and best use because I have a limited amount of time, right? You have a limited amount of resources. So it would really be a big, I think, challenge for you to make that happen. And I think there's probably a marrying between the two. Casey had said he didn't think it was seasonal. I think it's absolutely seasonal. I think that I, without doubt, work more at the end of the year and more around our summit. So there's like a April or like a March, April swing for me.
Definitely.
And there's like a November, December swing for me because at the beginning of the year, we're really focused on our biggest event. And at the end of the year, we're focused on closing out season of deals and our company retreat and closing out the year and projecting for next. So those two times are super, super busy. In the summertime, everybody knows I'm a big RV guy. I love traveling. Like, I'm not around as much. But nonetheless, I think that I do feel it's seasonal. I feel like it's a blend.
Yep.
But I do want to try in 2024 blocking time. I suggested in my leadership group today that I'm going to start blocking 10 to 5 as my work hours, and that's it, and that's all. I don't know how that's going to work. But we're going to sure try it for a little bit. So if you have a meeting already scheduled with me, Paige, in January for before 10 a.m., we're going to have to cancel it.
Okay. I'll
fair
get
enough.
that adjusted.
Got
So have you noticed then a correlation between maybe a more balanced lifestyle and increased efficiency or any creativity within the work you do?
Yeah, 100%. So when I really got with what Justin said early on, right? This concept of blended. So I think for me, it has helped me, and it's helped my family along the way too, because we know it's seasonal, and we know that it's blended. So that I'm around a little bit more in these months, not around a lot in these months, and we're all okay with that. I would say that if you do have others in your life, like most of us do, that matter to us, the concept of having a kind of a blended time frame it's not just good for you, it's good for your family.
Yeah.
So if I'm hitting kind of on all cylinders, I think that, it made me a more effective person in my life. It's allowed for more creative time for me. And then for the hours that I am in there, kind of like Casey said, you get really efficient with that time that you're spending. So without doubt, a kind of an increase across the board.
And I guess, has your perception of work-life balance evolved over the years? Maybe when you were at your landscaping company, how is it different, and what triggered those changes?
What a great question. One of the reasons I wanted Casey on the show early in season 1, or I guess early in this season 1 of the show, was because him and I had similar lifestyles when we were in our 20s. He, in that clip that you heard, he talked about working 80 hours a week. He was a young partier. I couldn't agree more. Like if I remember making my first good year in my landscaping company, I thought I was such a badass, Paige. I walked into a used car dealership with 20 grand cash and bought my first car, and then realized what a dumb move like that was, because interest rates at the time on a car were like 2.5%, and I could have like basically got free money, but I was like thought I was so cool. And then immediately between the partying with the guys in the landscaping company after work and the long ass hours, like we were in the shop at 5 a.m., we would work till about 8 p.m. till the sun went down, outside of my landscaping world, and then hanging out with the guys afterwards. I didn't have that great of a balance or blend.
Yeah.
During that time too, I got a divorce, and I ended up then selling my company. And that was my first aha moment, is that undoubtedly I think my wild focus and ridiculous hours had an impact on my marriage. And then I kind of came into EPI, if you remember that, and it was still, if you remember in the early days that you were here too, we were hustling like that.
I remember.
Traveling a lot, working long hours, and definitely not a fair and balanced life. And then as we got into our Initiative 1 training and the Fred Johnson stuff, that's why it's such a meaningful, I think, episode and clip for the season. It allowed us to figure out who we wanted to be.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like the conversation we had in one of these clips about you were just always taught that way.
Exactly.
Like I just thought that's how you run businesses. And not to say that when you go to start a company, you're certainly going to work more in a startup company than you are going to be once it's stabilized. There's without doubt phases of your growth. But I would challenge back to say, does it really have to be that way?
Exactly.
And so now you might make some sacrifices on your growth trajectory or how fast you can grow, but if it's at the sacrifice of family, health, or wellness, it doesn't have to be that way. So I would like to think a lot more balanced these days, and then challenge all of our team here in still a high growth company to kind of find that balance and blend for themselves. So nevertheless, definitely an impact moment.
How does it differ from your days as a janitor?
Oh my gosh, my days as a janitor were awful. It was what? What do you go to school for? Like 6 hours a day, and then you clean toilets for like 2 hours. It was
Not a lot of work-life balance there.
Not a lot of. It was a dirty job. I thought I want to always be on that show with what, Mike Rowe or something like that. Remember that
Dirty
guy?
Jobs.
Yeah,
I
Dirty
think.
Jobs. It only lasted 2 weeks, Paige. Although I think I was very thorough at that job. Cleaning toilets in an all-guys high schools, there's only so much I can handle there. Especially when all your buddies go there at the same time. They would mess up the bathroom intentionally before I went in there.
Yeah.
Nonetheless. Well, I think that brings us to the end of our season 1 recap episode. So, Paige?
I do have one more question for
okay.
you. So, doing the podcast this year, what was maybe your favorite, or what was the best part of doing this for you?
Man, I think it goes back to the challenge I guess I had for you in the creation of the podcast. I can remember you've asked me to do a podcast for a couple of years now, and I said, look, we have a lot of people doing exit planning podcasts. Let's promote what our SEPAs do.
Yeah.
And then we hired like a new PR company, and they said, Scott, you can't possibly be the authority in exit planning if you don't have a podcast in these days. And you kind of rolled your eyes and say, Scott, I told you so. And so my challenge back to you, though, was if we're going to do a podcast, I want to do it almost like radio show style. Yeah. I used to be, the Duke on 88.7 WJCU. So I wanted to get back and make it feel like a radio show and have it just be like super conversational. So you nailed it, right? I said it would be like hanging out at my kitchen table. So you got me this like nice Turkish table, and it's kind of set up like a den. And so I lead with that because having this podcast, the other thing I forced us to do is have us fly all of our guests into town. Yeah. And so why I think that's meaningful, and probably my favorite part about it is not only the stuff I learned on this show live and talking to our guests like we are today, but everything that goes on behind the scenes.
Yes.
So when you come in for the Exit Is Now podcast, you get to interact with the leadership team. You get to interact with a bunch of different folks from EPI. You get to go out to breakfast. We go out to dinners. And it has allowed us to get to know some, I think, critical partners better, and really express ourselves in different ways. So I think I have like a whole journal of thoughtful stuff that I have learned from our guests, and hopefully our team here at EPI has learned along the way. So I think that's probably my favorite part, is just be able to truly kind of hang out with people along the way and learn a lot more than what you hear just here on the hour or so of our show.
It's funny you mentioned the breakfast. We always say that those are the best part of doing the show, and we need to find out how somehow we can record in the restaurant.
Yeah,
It's
you
always
just-
the most
yeah.
insightful stuff.
I know. We sit around, and what she's describing, right, is we sit around at like a long breakfast table and we start jiving with our guests. It would be interesting to take those cameras and take these mics and just set them up and talk about candid and real conversation, seeing some of that. And so I totally agree. It's those kind of moments that truly have, I think, made some impacts on all of us.
So what are you looking forward to in the next year?
Yeah, season two of the Exit Is Now podcast. So for season 2, I'm going to continue the theme of talking to people that have really helped us along the value acceleration methodology journey as business leaders and as business owners. I think we kick off the year really with some heavy-hitting guests. So I'm interviewing more authors, more people like Tom Deans that have kind of edgy subjects, and this kind of continued, now that I have like 25-something episodes under my belt, really lean into these like candid and real conversations. And so I think we can look forward to that. We have, for folks that are interested in or coming to the Exit Planning Summit in April, we open up the first quarter of the year of season 2 with folks that you'll be able to meet at the Exit Planning Summit. So I think that if you thought we had interesting guests and topics, we have even bigger names joining us in the season 2 of the Exit Is Now podcast. And we have a couple of twists and turns along the way.
We do.
You want to talk about it?
Yeah, so some feedback that we received from our audience is that they want to get to know Scott a little bit more and maybe hear his perspective on a lot of things. So I think it's every third episode, every third or fourth, we're doing interviews with Scott. So
flip the script.
It'll be members of our leadership team or influential people in your life who get to come in.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. And again, we'll see you in 2024. So Paige, again, thanks for hanging out.
Yeah.
Thanks for producing this
Thanks
whole
for having
show
me.
and going on this whole journey with us. So tune in January 3rd for the first episode of season 2 at 1 p.m. Eastern time. So subscribe, listen, and leave a review on all of your podcast platforms. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, everybody. We'll see you next year.